Climate change is real and it's here. We've known about it for 30 years. There's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the global climate is getting warmer and more unstable. We're on a train that's out of control, and the capitalists aren't about to put the brakes on, so we have to. Now there are three reasons why they won't put the brakes on. The first is that any kinds of solutions, and real solutions exist, threaten the neoliberal strategies, the strategies of austerity they've been using in order to maintain and increase their power over the last 30, 40 years. The second is that carbon corporations are at the heart of the global capitalist system. They have enormous amounts to lose, and they have enormous power which they're using in order to hold on. The third is that our system is built on competition between corporations, but also between warring states, highly militarized states. This makes it almost impossible for them to find solutions collectively. But we have a fourth problem, which is that our side is divided by competition. There's a long history of struggles. The struggles are growing and they're coming together. They're overcoming the divisions that existed and exist. And together we can slam the brakes on climate change.
3,000 people died this year in Karachi and surrounding areas in Pakistan from a severe heat wave. That's one of the most direct expressions of climate change, of a warming planet. But climate change and issues around inequality aren't just being felt over there somewhere in the global south, in poorer parts of the world. I'm based in the UK right now, and people here are experiencing the problems as well. 15,000 people in this country died last year because they couldn't afford to heat their homes. Climate change is real and it's happening now. COP21, formerly called the Conference of the Parties, that is the parties of the UNFCCC, they come together every single year in a different city around the world to try to negotiate a treaty to address climate change. But in fact, a lot of people are calling it the Conference of the Polluters. The governmental representatives who are negotiating or attempting to negotiate these treaties aren't there on behalf of their own citizens. They're there on behalf of the companies and corporations that have been lobbying them. And in fact, the polluting corporations are often inside the very meetings where these decisions are being made. Our governments have been negotiating for 21 years to reduce greenhouse gases, to come up with some plan. And in all those 20 years, greenhouse gases have increased 60%. It's an utter disaster, and the climate movement has realized that instead of various NGOs going inside the COP and trying to lobby, trying to negotiate, trying to get support from their own governments, they're going to be in the streets and they're going to work on building a strong, powerful movement. Corporate and state power are intricately intertwined, and in the UK, we're uniquely positioned to confront that power because two of the wealthiest companies in the world are based here, BP and Shell. There are a number of battles underway. One approach that a number of very creative activists have taken in London and in other parts of the UK is to get these companies' logos out of the National Gallery and out of the British Museum and in other cultural institutions. People are also fighting to divest their institutions from these companies, from their educational institutions to their local councils to their any other type of institution they're affiliated with. Anywhere where money is invested, there are likely to be campaigns to get that money invested in renewable energy production and out of the dirty fossil fuels.
I want to tell you about Grandparents' Climate Action because it's something I've been involved in and which I think does something rather different. And it allows us to imagine how we can build to fight the power of these damned corporations. What it's doing is actually saying, we love this planet that we live on. It's a very beautiful planet. And we love our children. We love our grandchildren. We love the children to come. And let's build on that love. It's a way of accessing that empathy, that compassion. It's a way of actually drawing us together. One of the things, if one thinks generationally, is one thinks of transitions and just transitions, which is part of what the climate movement is constantly talking about. And a transition which Grandparent Climate Action has actually been invested in is the 1 million climate jobs. This is a movement that has been started in Britain nearly a decade ago now, and has now again an international kind of presence. What it's actually saying is we have to change the economy. We have to reduce the carbon in the air. And the way to do this in Britain, because that's the first example, is to change the transport system, to actually increase public transport, and therefore also fight austerity, increase the number of jobs that are involved in making buses, driving buses, running trains, putting down new rail tracks, and so forth. The other thing in Britain that's very important is housing rehab. Our houses leak. And the new housing is also appalling because of the air conditioning, the glass fronts, and so forth. We need to deal with that kind of way in which we are constantly putting carbon in the air. And that also requires a lot of new jobs. And the third is obviously turning our energy production into sustainable energy, which in Britain very often means offshore wind farms because they're very productive, and boy, do we have a lot of wind. But we can also do solar. But we also have to do grids. We have to actually connect all these sources of energy and to think internationally, because they have to be enormous supergrids to make it work. What's important about this is, first of all, there are a lot of jobs. 1 million jobs over 20 years, and we can do it. We can be nearly zero carbon Britain. That's fantastic. But it's not just the jobs. It is that the technology's here. Don't be fooled. We don't need new technology. We don't need some kind of silver bullet fix. What we need is political will. And to have the political will, we need to have a huge climate movement that is drawing in everyone, every grandparent, every grandchild, the whole lot of us to come in.
I've been a climate activist for 11 years, and I've never been more hopeful that maybe we can do something about this. Above all else, for me, that demonstration of 400,000 people over climate change last year, the biggest climate change demonstration ever in New York City, the biggest city in the most backward country in the world on climate change. Things are changing. But we also have to realize what we're up against. First, we're up against imperialism. Imperialism is not just a jargon word. It's the great powers of the world. Above all else, the power of the United States, but the power of Russia, the power of China, the power of Germany, and many other smaller powers. Those imperial powers work in two ways. One is that they're in constant competition with each other to control the world, the people of the world, the resources of the world. They're in economic competition with each other all the time. And they're in military, they're at war with each other a lot of the time. But mostly, they fight those wars as proxy wars, wars where other people die. The other thing that the great powers do, besides competing with each other, is they enforce the whole power of capitalism down on people in each country. You can see this. You can see this in the Middle East today. And for the last 50 years, you look at a situation where the imperial powers of the world want to keep the price of oil low so that they can make profits. To keep the price of oil low means taking the potential wealth away from the people in the countries that have oil. And the people in the countries that have oil know that's being done to them. So to do it to them, you have to have the torture prisons, the secret police, the dictatorships, the bombing from the air, the drones, the invading boots on the ground. All of that to terrify people into letting you keep the price of oil low. The same thing happens with climate change. I'll give you two examples. Look at Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. New Orleans is in the middle of 200 miles of refineries and petrochemical plants dependent on one of the great oil fields in the world. When Hurricane Katrina hit, the American army came in not to help people, not to save people, but they drove everybody out of the city. and they took control of a city with no people in it so that they could save the oil, save the refineries. Hurricane Katrina was partly climate change and partly a normal kind of hurricane. It was a combination. What we've seen in Darfur and Chad is pure climate change. In 1969, the rains in that part of the world failed because of climate change, and they never really recovered. So they had famines, they had droughts, again and again they had war. And what was the way that the great powers related to that? They came in and they all fought each other in proxy wars. We're told that what happened in Darfur is that Africans and Arabs were fighting each other, or that bad Muslims were fighting good Muslims, or we're told all about the divisions among those people. What was happening there, really, was that herders and farmers were killing each other for disappearing grass because of climate change. And the great powers, China, the United States, France, came in to stoke things up, to make things worse. That's what we'll see again. But it's not just imperialism. Even more important is class. Class and imperialism are together like this. When I say that we're up against class with climate change, I mean two things. First, and obviously, there's an enormous amount of work to be done, an enormous amount of jobs we need. We, working people, we need those jobs, but they don't want to pay for them. So there's a very classic confrontation over who pays. But there's a deeper confrontation. The values of our world, the dominant values of our world from the top down, are the values of greed, of competition. If we act on climate change, if we do what needs to be done, we're acting out of sharing. We're taking care of each other. We're taking care of all living things. We're standing by each other and standing by all the other species on the planet. And we're doing it collectively for the collective good, instead of profit, instead of greed, instead of division. If we do that, we'll change the world. And the people at the top know that. That's deeply what's at stake. I hope we can do it as fast as possible, but I think to do this one, to change the world, to take care of each other, to act with love towards each other, it's going to take a revolution.